Welcome to the SLP Stress Management Podcast, your place to manage stress, reduce the risk of burnout, and find more balance in your life, in and out of being an SLP or a helping professional, and really just as a human being. I'm your host, Jessie Andricks, and today I'm going to share a story with you about how mindfulness helped me to stop burnout before it started again. All right, if you've been following along with my story or listening to the podcast or reading the blog for a few years, then you've likely heard me talk about my experience with burnout and chronic stress and how it led me to leave the field of speech-language pathology for nearly 5 years, which I thought was going to be a permanent leave. What you might not have heard me talk about is how burnout and chronic stress started to creep back in a year after I came back to the field, even though I thought I was past it. I took 5 years off from being an SLP due to the amount of stress I was feeling each day and because it was growing and starting to affect my life outside of work. So in those 5 years, I worked in what I considered to be my dream job at the time, as a yoga teacher, as a mind-body fitness instructor, and an assistant studio manager. Doing this allowed me to let go of some of the stress from the demands of the SLP job, right? There was very little paperwork to do, not really much billing and those types of things. But it also helped me to learn about stress and to study it and the things that can help reduce it from the mind-body mindfulness perspective. When I did decide to come back into the field, I worked in teletherapy part-time, very, very part-time. So my first year, I started with 4 hours and eventually went up to 10. And I loved every moment of it. The students, the families, the new way to provide therapy, and connecting with other SLPs. And I also enjoyed being able to be at home with my daughter next door with our neighbor while I worked. It was really nice, and there was a lot of balance in it for me. But the next year changed. I still worked for the same schools and the same company, and there were 2 other big shifts that really happened. The first was that we moved to a new state. So we moved to a house that would eventually be and was our dream home, but it needed a lot of updates, and we did this with a 1-year-old. The other thing that happened is that I picked up twice as many hours and then some. And part of this was because I loved the work the year before, so I thought, why not? If I loved it so much, then having more of it will only be more to love. And the other part was because it was also more expensive where we moved to. I loved the work, but I didn't realize the pressure that would be there from the non-work things, like the move, adjusting to a new place, having my daughter in a preschool, but mostly from the amount of hours and the amount of other work that went with it that I had signed on for. My schedule was really full that second year. I was working the hours, right? The 20 and then some hours, but this also had makeup hours added on to it. Time that maybe the students were owed. Then there were meetings to hold. And of course, paperwork and billing and all of these extra things. So even with my daughter at preschool and only working those 20 hours, I was really working more, and I felt like I had no extra time. I enjoyed being at home, but I was starting to feel really trapped by the schedule and the being on and having to be available at all times. There was not much downtime between sessions, and for someone who loves being outside and moving, I was inside and seated a lot. And I was also trying to find time to work on the SLP stress management blog at the time, and to launch the podcast, and to reach out and speak with other SLPs and connect with others. And as far as my self-care practices went, I was squeezing them in without a plan whenever I could, and I thought this was the perfect solution. Any moment that I had, I could use it to practice self-care, right? How amazing would that be? If I had a no-show or a 10-minute break, or if I had some time before work started or a few minutes after I ended for the day, I could practice yoga. I could go on a hike. I could take my dog for a walk or try and meditate or do a workout video, whatever it might be. And I would do these things. I was doing these things and they were good for me, and the stress was still growing. And I knew that if it kept heading that way, I would be heading to burnout. And the reason? I was doing these things, but I wasn't being mindful. So it's true, I was pushing so much and so focused on doing the practices to manage stress that I was cutting out the mindfulness part that actually would help, and I stopped them from really working. So instead, it made them feel like one more thing on my to-do list that I had to squeeze in. Mindfulness is defined as paying attention on purpose in the present moment without judgment. I was somewhat on purpose, not very present, because even while I was practicing, I was thinking like, okay, how much longer do I have until this, workout that I'm doing is over? What's next? What do I have time for? What will I not have time for? How much more can I squeeze in? And I had a lot of judging about what I was doing. Was it enough? Was it too short? Was it too easy? Was this actually working? Should I be doing something else? Is this really worth doing right now? Should I be spending my time on something different? And a lot of that type of talk. So while I wasn't necessarily being mindful about my self-care, it was mindfulness that made me realize my lack of it, my lack of mindfulness around these practices, and kept me from heading further down the road to burnout. I was doing all the right things, right? I was doing self-care, I was moving, I was meditating, hobbies, taking time for myself when I could, but I was feeling worse and worse, and my stress was only growing. So once I took a pause and really got mindful, I observed what was happening, how I was experiencing the moment, to be in the moment, and to purposefully pay attention to it, I quickly realized why it wasn't working. I was constantly trying and pushing to do more with no plan or mindfulness about it, and it made it much harder and much less of a mindful experience. So taking the pause to become mindful allowed me to adjust, to see what I really needed, which was not squeezing things in at every moment, but to have more small breaks built into my day, more consistent time for self-care, and a very different schedule. This helped to manage the stress, to reduce it, and to turn it around before it became burnout. By having a mindfulness practice and being familiar with mindfulness, it stopped me from becoming a burned out SLP again. So if you're practicing some self-care or stress management tools, but it seems like the stress is growing, here are a few things you can do to help. You can take a pause to check in with yourself and see how you are doing and how you are feeling in that moment. And this will bring more awareness to it, which is one of the paying attention on purpose part. It's one of those key pieces of mindfulness. And then bring that mindfulness back to yourself. So yes, paying attention on purpose, but also in the present moment, observing how you're doing in that moment without judging, without saying, I should be doing this, I need to do this next, but seeing how you're doing and what you may actually need. Then look at the current tools you're using. Are they being approached in a mindful way, or are you just using them because you feel like you have to use them? And then try something new if needed. Maybe it's a new tool, but maybe it's a new schedule or a new approach to whatever it is that you're doing. Taking a moment to be truly mindful and look at what you're currently working with can make all the difference. So how has mindfulness helped you to prevent or reduce the chronic stress and burnout that you face? Share in the comments below or send me a message, Jessie@jessieandrix.com, or follow me on Instagram @JessieAndrix and send me a direct message there. I would love to hear from you and to see how you are using mindfulness or even where you are struggling to use it. You can also sign up for the What is Mindfulness workshop happening on February 24th. If you can't attend live, it will also be available as a recording after. And in this, you'll learn more about mindfulness, but you also get to ask any questions that you may have about this topic or share some of those experiences that you've had or the struggles you're facing when it comes to using mindfulness. And when we do this, we can start to really put those tools into practice, have that stress just automatically be managed, and build that resilience. Thank you so much for tuning in today. Love and light to you. I don't know about you, but I'm kind of tired of simply managing stress. So if you constantly feel like you're managing your stress and you're focusing your stress and you will join me for this new monthly workshop series that's launching soon. So join me for the Resilient SLP. Non-stop, but the effects of it and the way that it sticks with you can be lessened through resilience. In the Resilient SLP, you'll get schedules to bringing more mindfulness into your workplace itself, to things like yoga practices and meditation. And you'll have the opportunity, depending on the workshop, to earn professional development hours, either for ASHA or even for Yoga Alliance. Find out more at the link below or at jessieandrix.com/the-resilient-slp-monthly-workshop-series, or just click the link below. Look for the Resilient SLP starting soon. I can't wait to have you join.